Hi, I'm Nitsana Darshan-Leitner, a human rights activist attorney, and this is 18 Questions for 40 Thinkers from 1840.
So we'll begin where we always do. As an Israeli and as a Jew, how are you feeling at this moment in Israeli history?
That's an easy question because it's talking about Israeli history and not Jewish history. So in terms of the state of Israel, I think this is a crisis that Israel have never dealt with before. And perhaps Israel can grow from this nightmare that occurred on October 7th. I think this is an opportunity that Israel has to grab in order to finally stabilize itself in the Middle East with the help of United States and other nations that think that Israel should exist as the country for the Jewish people.
How are you feeling about it, though?
Look, after October 7th, I was devastated. I felt that that what Hamas did, killing, terrorizing, butchering, raping, affected each and every one here in the state of Israel. But I feel that perhaps this is just another milestone in the history of the state of Israel. I'm part of it. I fight for it. I do anything I can in order to shape the future, utilizing legal actions. And not only me, my family, my children are going to the army, are participating in this war. In the end, we have as a people to prevail and to rise up and to use this crisis and it's an opportunity that we never had before.
You made a distinction between Israeli and Jewish history. I'm curious if I frame the question in terms of Jewish history, how would you feel?
Jewish history is much easier because the Jewish people had so many crises and so many horrors that we passed that it just, another obstacle, another thing, another disaster. In terms of history of 3,300 years, October 7th is not as devastating as the state of Israel sees it. In the end, we had pogroms and we had the Holocaust and we had the Inquisition and we had, and this is from modern history. If I go back to the Temple Mount and to the wars that the Jewish people had over the years, this is like, a little thing that we're passing. This is like a totally different perspective from the Jewish people versus the Israeli history.
Are you scared?
I was scared. I was scared. After October 7th, I was scared. Not only me, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was scared. The people in Israel were scared because we felt like if Hamas, which is a disgruntled terror organization, ignorant, untrained, poor, was able to come into our territory and do a massacre. And the IDF, the strongest army in the world, the best army in the world, was not able to stop it, was not able, not I'm talking about preventing it, but not able to stop it when it happened. That's scary. And then when Hezbollah started threatening with a war that we Israelis are so scared of because we were told that Hezbollah has the capabilities of firing thousands of missiles, long range with high explosive that can devastate and collapse buildings in Tel Aviv and hit the airport and hit the electricity source in a way that Israel will not be able to survive. And then Iran threatening with their nuclear program. So, yeah, I was scared. But I'm not scared anymore. Israel turned the corner. Israel was able to win Hezbollah over, a little bit win Hamas over. It's not the end yet. Iran is defensible now, so we are on the right side now.
What do you think has been Israel's greatest success and greatest mistake in the current war against Hamas? Or I guess I should say the war against Hamas, because it's currently, in some sense, on pause.
I think the biggest success was not against Hamas, was against Hezbollah with the Beeper operation.
Against Hamas, though, what would you say was the greatest success and mistake?
Israel didn't have success against Hamas yet. It's an ongoing war. You can name killing Yahya Sinwar, but it wasn't really like a sophisticated operation. It was in the course of the war. He happened to be there.
It was incidental.
Just incidental, exactly. Israel did not succeed to overcome Hamas or to kill Hamas, so I don't see any successes yet. I think that without Trump, Hamas would not agree to release even one prisoner. Hamas, the mere fact that Hamas stands strongly and insists that in return to the hostages, Israel would withdraw from Gaza and leave the Netzarim road and leave Philadelphia road shows you that we didn't devastate Hamas yet.
What do you think has been the greatest mistake against Hamas?
I think the biggest mistake Israel had is not to take over Gaza. Because in the beginning of the war, we went full force, we crushed buildings, we exploded all the areas, we pushed the population from the northern part of the Gaza Strip to move to the south. We were taking over parts in Gaza, and but then we let it go. Then we just decided to use a tactic that maybe is good for Judea and Samaria when you go just in and out, kill terrorists, but then go back and stay away. A tactic that perhaps good for Judea and Samaria, but certainly is not good for Gaza, because in order to displace Hamas from Gaza, you have to take over the Gaza Strip. You have to replace Hamas as the governor in Gaza. And you cannot do it just with little small operations of in and outs. And the refusal of the chief of staff to take over the humanitarian aid, to make sure that it's not going to Hamas, to prevent the population from going back into their houses in the northern part of the strip, or to resemble anything that looks like a military governor in Gaza, brought us to a situation that we cannot win.
In an ideal world, what do you wish would have happened when the war began? Meaning, you said the first 2 months of the war, let's say, Israel was operating militarily how you'd like them to, and then afterward, they switched course and they scaled back. What would you have liked to have happened, and in your idea, what should have happened?
To keep going, to take over Gaza, to control Gaza. Nobody likes it, but you don't have a choice but to have a military administration in Gaza. So what Israel needed to do is simply, listen, you can kill the terrorists, but you can't kill the last one of them because they hide in tunnels. And they still get the support of the population because the population in Gaza is fed from Hamas. Hamas takes over the humanitarian aid, the food that is brought into the Gaza Strip, and just give it to the people, sell it to the people.
But when Israel tried taking over or having consistent military presence in the Gaza Strip, they faced significant difficulty and significant risk to the soldiers, which makes it seem like that wasn't ever really feasible to have Israel militarily ruling Gaza.
Israel didn't try.
Mm-hmm. What would trying have looked like?
Look, of course it comes with cost, no question. But what's the alternative? The alternative is just to abandon the hostages, get out of Gaza, leave Hamas in power. This is the alternative. And this cost us with more casualties.
How do you think Hamas views the outcome and aftermath of October 7th? Was it a success in their eyes?
Hamas wants to believe that they won, and they deliver this message to the population in Gaza and try to convince the entire world, at least the Muslim world, that they won. And they are doing it pretty successfully. They march our hostages to a ceremony and show how they are, from a powerful position, releasing them. They march with their arms and weapons on the streets. They are getting close to the fence once again. They force Israel to withdraw from the Netzarim junction and from very soon the Philadelphia road. So Hamas showed the world that they won. And you know what? If the world believes that Hamas won, they will not support Israel.
Why do you think Israel is so hesitant? Or let me ask differently. Why do you think Israel isn't acting on this? Meaning, you mentioned before that, without the Trump administration's involvement, the ceasefire deal wouldn't have been reached and not a single hostage would have been released. But many have pointed out that it's the same deal, or very similar deal, effectively similar to what the Biden administration had encouraged Israel to try and agree to in May. Do you then view that the Trump administration is weakening Israel, or that Israel has a larger plan in store? What's your perspective on what's going on?
We don't know all the facts. I want to believe, though, that we know that it was the same deal that was offered to Benjamin Netanyahu back in May, or at least was forced on Netanyahu back in May. However, Hamas did not agree to the deal, and this is why it was not got to execution. When Trump came in, he promised hell by January 20th if the deal will not be signed. And that pressure was put on both parties, on Hamas and on Israel. Hamas did not have a choice but to agree to the deal that Biden offered back then in May. And Netanyahu didn't have a choice but to agree. Once Hamas agrees, this is it. You can't be the stubborn side, especially if Trump asked you before he started the negotiation if you agree to the previous structure of the deal. So Netanyahu kind of was compelled to agree to this deal. And I can tell you that it's a devastating deal. It's a very, very troubling, dangerous deal. However, this is one stage. We have another stage. And in the other stage, in the next stage, I hope that Prime Minister Netanyahu will have the courage to stand with Trump and find another way to bring back our hostages, not by withdrawing from Gaza, not by letting Hamas take over Gaza, but find creative alternative ways to do it. And I think Trump has the interest or perhaps the heart to stand to the side of Israel in this occasion.
And obviously, Trump's recent announcement of his plan for the U.S. to take over Gaza, we'll talk about that a little bit later, so we won't get into that now. But to shift gears a little bit and talk more about your role as an Israeli citizen, I'm curious, let me ask it this way. What do you look for in deciding which Knesset party to vote for?
Which political party to vote for?
Well, you're welcome to say who you vote for. I'm more curious when you're deciding who you're voting for. What are you thinking about? What values or goals do you want them to have?
In Israel, we divided between the right to the left. The right is more nationalist, is against Palestinian state, for instance, in favor of more security borders in Israel. perhaps leaning towards applying sovereignty in Judea and Samaria. All these kind of concepts that are removed from the left. And therefore, naturally, I would go to the right side. Now, there are many parties on the right side. There is Likud, Otzma Yehudit, religious Zionism. And here it goes according to personality, who stands at the hand on the in the head of the party, and what specifically they promise to do. Not necessarily will fulfill the promise, but at least what their agenda. And then it goes into seriously personality. You like the guy, don't like the guy.
What do you look for? You look for what kind of leader do you look for? What kind of party do you look for?
First, I'm looking for a leader that I can support personally, meaning he's not corrupt, he's not a criminal, he was not involved with issues that I don't want to be affiliated with. Someone that I can't say look up to, because unfortunately our leaders are not so admirable, but someone that I can feel comfortable personally to be affiliated with. And then I look at the party. See, it's the opposite. It's not necessarily, maybe in the United States it's the same. I mean, you prefer to vote for a president that you don't feel disgraced by voting for. So here we have the same thing, and then you go into look at the party, if the party. But again, there is not so much difference between the parties. I mean, even if you go to Otzma Yehudit, which is the extreme right, being part of the coalition of the government doesn't give you the power to really do what you claim you are going to do. So voting for each one of this party would be okay, but it very much depends who stands in the head of the party.
Which is more important for Israel, Judaism or democracy?
Judaism, in my eyes. Israel, first and foremost, is a Jewish state. And it cannot compromise for being a democratic state. Unfortunately, in recent years, the Supreme Court in the state of Israel prefers Israel to be democratic rather than Jewish. And case after case, they prefer the rights of the minorities, because they are protecting human rights, that govern the rights of the majority. And
Can you give me an example of what you're thinking of?
Talking about Palestinian rights, for instance. If take for instance, the security fence that Israel built in order to secure the areas to secure the area from threats from the Judea and Samaria going into Israel of Palestinians. And the Supreme Court decided that in certain places there should not be a fence. They decided that in certain roads the fence should be moved. They decided that in certain areas the fence should not include parts but be more lenient towards the Palestinians, compromising on the security demands of the IDF and the security.
But is that a Jewish and democratic issue, or is that a security and democratic issue?
This is, okay, you talk about them, because this is a democratic issue, because the Supreme Court comes and say, I want Israel to be a democratic state, and in order to keep it as a democratic state, I have to take into consideration the minorities' rights, and then it's going towards them.
But your problem with it is that it's compromising the security. It's not a Jewish democratic conflict or tension.
Why? Because no, you defer the Arabs on the Israelis. You defer the Arabs on the Jews. Living in the state of Israel, Sometimes you have to make a decision whose rights you want to protect, the Arab rights or the Jewish rights. And, and the Supreme Court sometimes, most of the times, rules in favor of the Palestinians. But I can give you an example of being a Jewish. Yeah, right. So the famous case is whether people are allowed to bring chametz in Pesach to the hospitals in Israel. All kind of visitors that want to come and visit their relatives who are hospitalized in the hospital. And the Supreme Court came and said that Israel is a democratic state, and they have to protect all the rights of all the minorities, and therefore Arabs or non-religious Jews should enjoy chametz in Pesach, taking away the consideration that the majority of the people in Israel are Jews. The chametz in Pesach is a consensus not to be allowed in public buildings, and to keep in mind that in the end, we want to keep the Jewish state as a Jewish state and not necessarily as a democratic state. I can give you a slew of examples, but in probably more and more there is a gap in the people in Israel. What should Israel would be, democratic and Jewish, or Jewish and democratic?
Should Israel treat its Jewish and non-Jewish citizens the same?
Sure. Sure. There is equality in Israel, and Jews and non-Jews are treated the same, not should be treated the same, are treated the same, as long as you don't undermine the sovereignty of the state of Israel. If you call to kill Jews, or if you support the terrorism, or if you align with the Palestinians that, or Hamas that want to kill Jews, you should not be treated equally.
What role should the Israeli government have in religious matters?
Israel does not have a separation of religion, for the reason that I mentioned before, that Israel is a Jewish state. And our first Prime Minister, David Ben-Gurion, understood that in order to keep the society in Israel unified, and in order to respect all the parts of the Israeli people, he has to compromise and to preserve some Jewish rights, which should be in the consensus. He believed very much in the Bible. He believed that the right of the people to the country, to the area of Israel, derives from the Bible, and therefore you have to preserve the minimal orders of the Bible, which is Shabbat, holidays, the yeshivot, letting students in the yeshivot exempt from the army in order to continue studying, transportation on Shabbat, and so on and so on. And since then, most of the governments in Israel are going this way, and preserves the Jewish religion to a certain extent.
Now that Israel already exists, what's the purpose of Zionism?
To keep the state of Israel alive, to keep it to exist. If you are not a Zionist, so you can open the gates of the state of Israel to everyone, and then lose the Jewish majority in Israel, and it kind of the end of the Jewish state.
Is opposing Zionism inherently anti-Semitic?
100%.
Can you say more about that?
Today there is no anti-Semitism that it's based solely on religion. You won't see crusades or Christians or, calling against the Jewish people, but you will see them calling against the Jewish state. It's easy, it's more comfortable, it's politically correct to go against Israel rather than the Jewish people. But in the end, there is no existence to the state of Israel without the Judaism part of it. So being anti-Semite is actually anti-Zionist and quite versa.
For many people, though, they say that their opposition to Zionism is either A, part of a more general opposition to nation states in general, or is B, specifically against the history of Zionism and what that means for the Palestinian citizens. In those cases, would you still say that opposing Zionism is anti-Semitic?
Why do you exist? I'm sorry. Why do you against? Sorry. Why are you against the existence of the state of Israel as a Jewish state? Why? Every nation in the world deserves a state, but not the Jews. And I'm very careful in my words because the next question will be, hey, so the Palestinians should also deserve a state? No, the Palestinians are not a people. The Jewish people exist for 3,300 years. It had a state. The Judea was the Jewish state in the days of the temple, the first and the second. The Jews always were living in the state of Israel, in the land of Israel, not the state of Israel, in the land of Israel. And therefore they had a moral and historic right to go back and create again, to build up the Jewish state. On their way, they had to fight those who object their settlement in the land of Israel, which were the Arabs, not the Palestinians, it was the Arabs. It was the Arabs that lived in the land of Israel prior to 1948, that even before the state was created, already fought the Jews that were living here. We have the programs from the 1900, not from the 20th century. And therefore, you cannot object Zionism just for the pure fact that the Jews had to fight for their life in order to build their country. If you do that, you're anti-Semite.
What do you mean the Palestinians are not a people?
There is no people called the Palestinian people. The people that lived here, which have Arab nationality, came from Saudi Arabia, came from Egypt, came from Jordan. Nobody lived in the land of Israel under Palestine. Palestine was a name that was called the area that was given from the Roman times. There is no people that continued their history generation after generation after the generation that is called Palestinian people. The Palestinians are Arabs that came to Judea and Samaria and came to the Haifa and Tel Aviv from other countries, and when the independence war broke out, had to leave these areas and live in different places. After Six-Day War, in order to justify a Palestinian state, you needed to create a Palestinian people. You couldn't come and say we need a Palestinian you couldn't come and say we need a Palestinian state for the Arab population, because you have 22 Arab countries that people can go to. Why you need a Palestinian state? And then you had to create a Palestinian people.
There's more to say on that, but I want to go to other questions. If you were making the case for Israel, where would you begin?
I would begin from the days of the Bible. Yeah, far, far, far away. I know it might sound messianic, to come and speak about the Bible, but I'm a religious Jew, and I believe that our right to our land is from the Bible, is from our ancestors that lived here, and from the God's promise to give the Jewish people the land of Israel. If you don't believe in that, you really have no right to live here.
Can you say more about that?
People come and say that Zionism is racism. It has no right to exist because Jews came here, pushed away the Arabs that were living here for generations, or at least 400 years, and therefore they have no right for a land of their own. What do you answer these people? According to history, it's kind of right? You brought hundreds of thousands of immigrants from different countries, took over this land, and pushed the Arabs away. Now you became the majority because you were the stronger, or you were luckily won the war. What's your argument against these people? The only argument is that it's our country. It's our country. Why it's our country? Not because we were stronger than the Arabs in 1948. Not because Europe brought us a Holocaust that they felt bad about it and they granted us a land. Not because the foreign minister of England, Balfour, thought that perhaps the Jews, as the rest of the nations, should deserve a land. No, because we were here before. We were the first one to be here before anybody else. This is our land. This is our country. And this is the creator of the world that promised us that although he expels us from our country, we'll be able to go back and to build a state again. And if you don't believe in this, it's very hard to answer your opponents why not only you have a right to live in the land of Israel, but to kill all the enemies that obstruct you from living in the state of Israel.
Is the IDF the world's most moral army?
Unfortunately, yes.
Why do you say unfortunately?
Because if we weren't so moral, we would have sacrificed less soldiers in our wars. A lot of our casualties occur because we are protecting the life of our enemies in a way that sacrifices the life of our soldiers. Take for example, the war in Gaza. The war in Gaza could have ended long ago if the IDF would have just come in, kill anyone in his way, destroy all the building, expel the population, work the same way United States military worked in Afghanistan, in Iraq. Then it wouldn't have 800 casualties of IDF soldiers. We would have much less. And on one hand, you say that having a legal advisor in every tank or in every helicopter protect the soldiers for being indicted for war crimes. And I believe me, I worked in this field, and I protect IDF soldiers from war crimes, and I fight on their behalf on the International Criminal Court, and so on and so on. But sometimes you say that it's not really fair that what other nations can do, other militaries can afford, Israel cannot afford. If Israel will not be so moral, we would have won these wars. If Israel would not protect so much the life of the civilians of our enemies, Israel would have been in a different place. Sometimes you have to draw the line. Sometimes you have to make the decision. It's either their citizens' life or our citizens' life. It's not our fault that Hamas using this population as human shields. It's not our fault that this population allows Hamas to use them as human shields. It's not our fault that Palestinians in Gaza cheer Hamas, help Hamas, support Hamas, hide missiles and rockets in every house and in every hospital and kindergarten. It's not our fault. So if we have to dismantle Hamas and there will be casualties, we don't have to keep morality in the end. There is a limit that we have to withdraw. And unfortunately, Israel, until this day, does not withdraw this line, still considers the life of the citizens of our enemies.
Do you think Israel should have any regard for the civilians in Gaza?
Anyone?
Any regard or care for the civilians in Gaza or responsibility?
I think Israel doesn't have a choice but to regard the lives of the citizens in Gaza.
Why don't they have a choice?
I would come with a slogan that there is no innocent civilian in Gaza, right? We saw them coming into our envelope kibbutzim and massacring and butchering and raping and pushing babies into the oven. And there wasn't terrorists alone, there were civilians as well. We saw them cheering when the Hamas came back with hostages, and we saw them hiding the hostages in their houses, and we saw them applauding Hamas, even now in the disgusting ceremonies of hostages release that they are conducting in Gaza, cheering and admiring and endorsing Hamas. There is no innocent person in Gaza. So on one hand, Israel should not regard any of these Palestinians and do whatever they need in order to win the war, in order to dismantle Hamas. On the other hand, unfortunately, Israel is constrained by the international law that does not allow it to take actions which are not proportional to their goal, meaning that if Israel wants to kill a terrorist, they have to take into consideration the amount of civilians surrounding him, for instance. So, but on the third hand, it's not really fair that Israel will be the only one that will keep the rules of the international law and Hamas will be free to violate them constantly. So it's in asymmetrical war, there should be asymmetrical consideration. The same way Hamas does not regard our civilians and target civilians with rockets and missiles and went into houses of people and killed them in their sleep and slaughter babies, civilians, not soldiers, civilians, and kidnap them to Gaza, why should Israel be so moral, be so considerate, not saying go to Gaza and butcher babies over there? Israel does not do that. But at least when they want to target a military target, don't regard the population around it. Go and do what you need to do in order to prevent Hamas from doing another October 7 against us.
You say there are no innocent civilians in Gaza. A 5-year-old Palestinian or Gazan boy or 6-year-old Gazan girl, in your eyes, are not innocent in Gaza.
Was Abigail, the 3 years old that was kidnapped to Gaza, innocent or not innocent? We also have children. Once again, I'm not saying go and kidnap their soldiers to Israel. Go and push them into ovens. But there is a price for the parents of these children to put their children among terrorists. There is a cost for allowing a terror organization to live inside you. And don't tell me they are trapped. Don't tell me they are captured. Don't tell me they are forced to do it. There are 2 million people there. If they really wanted to get out of Gaza, if they really wanted to change the administration in Gaza, if they really wanted to be against Hamas in Gaza, they could have done it.
But isn't that what some would say differentiates Israel from Hamas? That Hamas is a terrorist organization that doesn't have regard for an innocent life, but Israel does?
So we do. I'm telling you, we do.
But I mean,
We
you're saying that that's not
intentionally,
ideal. In an ideal world, Israel wouldn't have that type of regard, and it really only has that type of constraint because of international law. But if Israel were really, doing the best thing possible, it wouldn't have that type of restraint.
you have to differ. You have to make a separation. There is an intentional killing, and there is casualty that happened. It's a collateral damage. Israel will never intentionally kill civilians. Never. Israel will not see a group of children playing on the beach of Gaza and shoot a missile on them. But Israel will see a bunch of terrorists hiding in the shore of Gaza and shoot a rocket, and incidentally, children that were playing there will be killed. That's the difference. And yes, of course, there is a difference between us to a terror organization which deliberately would have shot a missile into the Israeli children or rape 3,000 or go into a festival of 3,000 singers and dancers and butcher them and rape them. This is the difference.
Can questioning the actions of the government and army, even in this war, can that be considered a form of love and patriotism? People who question the government or the army, is them doing that, is that type of questioning, can that be thought of as like a type of patriotism or a type of love for Israel?
To question the military
To question the military, to question the government, any criticisms or questions that people have on the government, can doing that be a type of love?
Certainly, from both sides. People have criticism on the government from both sides. Some people say that the government does not do enough to release the hostages, for instance. And some people say that Israel does not do enough to destroy Hamas. Criticizing the IDF, criticizing the government is a part of our democratic system. And we should raise these questions. Where was the IDF on October 7th? How the government of Israel allowed October 7th to happen? Where was the information of Shabak? And why, until this day, Israel does not take over Gaza? And why, until this day, there are still more than 70 hostages in Gaza? We have to have questions.
What do you think is the most legitimate criticism leveled against Israel today?
It's on both sides. One will be Israel failed for rescuing the hostages. And some would say Israel failed from destroying Hamas. But both sides will have the devastating question, Israel failed on October 7th. Totally failure.
Before we move on to the next question, I'm also curious, your work is covered and extensively with Shurat HaDin in suing terrorist organizations and countries that finance terror to reward Israeli victims. And there's this really wonderful quote that you had in the New York Times in a profile almost a decade ago, I believe, where you said that there's a price to pay for Jewish blood. So I'm curious how your relationship to international law or the law in general works that in some ways it's definitional to how you approach justice for terror victims. But on the other hand, you see it as unjustifiably restraining Israel or unjustifiably weighing in on the war in Gaza and actually harming Israel.
I don't see. I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
My question more generally is how do you relate to international law? Because in some parts of international law,
So I
you need for
said,
your work, and
yeah.
then in other parts of international law, you see as like it shouldn't really be relevant.
So I tried to explain before. It's not fair that international law will work only one way. You can't. It's not what we are conducting today are not the regular wars, the traditional wars of a military against military. It's a military against a terror organization, and a military, as we said, needs to follow the rule of law that prohibits you from targeting civilians, prohibits you from using your population as human shields, prohibits you from hiding among civilians, not wearing signia, not to define yourself as a soldier, and not to fight from a war zone. All these rules are strictly kept by the State of Israel. None of them is kept by Hamas. Hamas is using their population as human shields. Hamas targets Israeli civilians. Hamas hiding among civilians, not wearing signias, and doesn't fight from terror zones, but only from hospitals and schools and people's houses. So to begin with, it's asymmetrical. Now you come and say there is a way to enforce international law by forcing the parties to fight according to the rule of law. But as where you can enforce your law on
You
Israel,
can't enforce it on a terror
you
group.
can enforce
So
it on a
meaning,
terror group.
if I almost may clarify, and you'll tell me if I'm understanding correctly, your issue is that international law, when it's military against military, makes sense and is appropriate. But when it's a military against a terror group, the fact that international law isn't adjusting for that asymmetrical battle is problematic.
Exactly.
Okay, I understand.
Exactly. Take a look, for instance. The International Criminal Court decided to issue arrest warrants against the leaders of the conflict. Against the leaders of the State of Israel and of Hamas. The court believes that Israel caused war crimes, they caused starvation in Gaza, they caused humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and they do it intentionally, and therefore they should be indicted for war crimes. And the court believes that Hamas doing what they did in October 7th is a crime against humanity. The way they conduct the war using population as human shields is a war crime, and therefore they should be indicted for war crimes. Quite equal, right? They enforce the law quite equal on both sides. Benjamin Netanyahu and Gallant, the prime minister and the defense minister, that now might be arrested in different countries in the world because the court issued arrest warrants against them, will be careful. They are now under indictment. They will need to fight these arrest warrants. They will need perhaps to go to court. They will need perhaps to convey other countries to cancel these arrest warrants. Perhaps they will even need to go and defend themselves in court. It's a real arrest warrants against real people. But what's the effect on the Hamas leaders? Who cares? They will come and tell you, who cares? We're not leaving the Gaza Strip in any ways. We don't have to face any arrest warrants in different countries. It doesn't affect us. We don't give a damn. That will be their response. And this is why it's asymmetrical. You can enforce international law only against those who honor the law, not against those that despise it and don't care. And that's the asymmetrical situation where we are in.
Do you think peace between Israelis and Palestinians will happen within your lifetime?
No.
My dad has a joke that as a follow-up I should ask, what about in my lifetime?
There is a joke that somebody dies, goes to heaven, and he has the opportunity to ask God one question. And he asks the question of, God, you must tell me. Now when I'm dead, my life is over, I just need to ask you one question. Will there ever be peace between Israel and the Palestinians? I understand it's not going to be in my lifetime, but will it be in my child time, in my grandchildren time, in my grandchildren time? God answers, not even my time.
Was there ever a point when you thought peace was possible?
No, no, no. The idea of the peace with the Palestinians rise up only in the Oslo Accords. Before that, nobody spoke about the peace with the Palestinians because the Palestinians, I told you, were not a people, did not even speak about the Palestinian state. So there was not a defined enemy that we have to make peace with. We had to make peace with Egypt. We had to make peace with Jordan. We even spoke about potential peace with Syria. But the Palestinians were not a component that you had really to regard. After the Oslo Accords, suddenly you created a Palestinian Authority. You agreed in the entering agreement of the Oslo Accords that within 5 years you will start considering changing the kind of the authority of the Palestinians, perhaps considering a Palestinian sovereignty or from a different kind. You didn't mention sovereign Palestinian state, but it was obvious that it's one of the options. And then when Yasser Arafat realized that he cannot achieve the goal, which is not creating a Palestinian state, but really displacing Israel with a Palestinian state, he started an intifada, and then Israel thought perhaps they should make peace with the Palestinians. But everybody realized, or at least the right wing side of the country realized, that you cannot make peace with the Palestinians because the Palestinians don't really want peace. They want to kill you. They want to replace the Jewish state with a Palestinian one. They don't want to live side by side with Israel. They don't want a two-state solution. Even now, if you go to the Palestinians and you tell them, I'm willing to give you all the West Bank, all East Jerusalem, all Gaza, obviously, everything that was yours prior to the Six-Day War, the Palestinians will not agree. They don't agree. They were offered in 2000 by Prime Minister Ehud Barak in Washington to give them 98% of the areas that Israel controlled after 1967, giving them back. And they don't agree. You know why? Because they cannot agree. They cannot let land that they lived on for many, many years to be controlled by somebody else. It's called the Sumud. It's called the Waqf. It's a holy land. And therefore, they can't accept the idea that Jews will live in Tel Aviv, in Jaffa, in Akko. It's not the Jewish land. It's their land. You can't make peace then with people that want you out of what they consider to be their land. If you look at their maps are the entire land of Israel because they don't believe in the right of a Jewish state. So there is no making peace with these people.
What should happen with Gaza and the Palestinian-Israeli conflict after the war?
I think Trump's idea is a great one. Make it United States territory.
Before Trump's announced plan, did you want Israel to take over Gaza entirely? I guess you had mentioned that earlier, but
I think we don't have a choice. Yeah, I think
so are
giving
you upset that
them
the U.S. is looking to take it over? And do you think that'll actually happen?
there are two options: whether just leave Gaza destroyed, which level it down, don't let anybody live there anymore, or rebuild it. But if you rebuild it, don't build it with Hamas there or with the Palestinian people who support Hamas there. Rebuild it from scratch. This is why I like Trump's idea of vacating the strip from all the Palestinians, building it, and then give visas to this area for people who don't want to kill you or kill each other. It's a dream. Before Trump came into the equation, I believe that Gaza has to be controlled by Israel. There is no other choice. Militarily, Israel has to be in Gaza. But I don't believe that Israel should be the one that administrating the population in Gaza.
Why?
It's very costly. It's not worth our while. It should be given to the Emirates or Saudi Arabia, the more moderate Arab countries, to go and control 2 million people. Why it should be on the burden of Israel? Having said all that, Israel must be present military in Gaza. They cannot just leave it to the Egyptians or to the Emirates or the Saudi Arabia. The same way Israel present its military in Judea and Samaria, they will never vacate these areas. It should be in Gaza. We had a very bad experiment giving lands to complete control of Palestinians. We did it in Gaza, we disengaged from Gaza, we gave it to the Palestinians, and we received in return a massacre of October 7.
I've seen many experts and lawyers saying that Trump's plan to displace the Palestinians and move them out of Gaza would violate international law. As a lawyer, do you disagree with that?
First, if it goes voluntarily, it's not a violation of the international law. International law prohibits coercion of an expelling population. And I believe that if the gates of Gaza would be open, and if Egypt opens its gate or Jordan opens its gate and absorb these people, or at least be a path through to a third party, half of the population in Gaza would leave. What do you do with the other half? I would say that there is a coercion to move these people away from the Gaza Strip. First, there is a humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Not right now, because right now, Israel lets 600 trucks going into Gaza a day. There is a flood of food and merchandise and oil and electricity in Gaza. This will stop. This will stop because after the war is over, Israel has no reason to support the population in Gaza. Second, you have to rebuild Gaza. I mean, again, either you level it down or you rebuild it.
But this plan wouldn't have all of the Palestinians outside of Gaza. I mean, this seems different than Trump's plan, which is, I mean, I know his aides afterward tried to, soften it a little bit.
No, you asked about the international law.
Yeah, so I'm curious, meaning because it seems like from what you're discussing, it seems like that's a different scenario than what Trump's describing, meaning how international law would view it. Because it's voluntary immigration for let's assume.
It's the same thing. Israel could have expelled the Palestinians from Gaza. Israel did it from the north to the south. Israel, if they want to, can get the permission of other country to load these people on boats and send them away. Israel will not do it because it might consider to be a war crime. But I'm giving you reasons why it's not really a war crime, because if Israel has no obligation to feed these people, Israel was forced to do it by the Biden administration and is doing it now because we signed the hostage release deal. It's part of the ceasefire. Once the fire is over, or once the war is over, Israel has no obligation to feed the Palestinian Gaza. Israel is not obligated even to allow other countries to feed the Palestinian Gaza. What will be the fate of the Palestinian Gaza then? Hunger, starvation, and death. And therefore, from humanitarian reasons, you can force these people to leave. That's the answer for the international law. International law initially prohibits expelling people. But if the alternative is dying, you can do away from the international law and move this population. And the third reason is that in the end, you want to give this population an opportunity to live nicely, peacefully, safely in another place, not under Hamas. As long as Hamas controls the Gaza Strip, these people deemed to destruction and death and poverty. So for this reason, you have to compromise the international law as well.
Has Trump disappointed you? Or has Netanyahu disappointed you?
I, quite frankly, did not have any hopes from Netanyahu.
Why is that?
I think that he is responsible for October 7th. And he's responsible for the war right now. He's responsible for the fact that we are not winning the war. He's the prime minister. I certainly don't expect anything from Netanyahu. And I did have hopes from Trump to help Netanyahu finally win this war. And when I said we are not into the details of this hostage release deal, I still want to believe that there is something beyond this first phase, that Trump has more creative ideas, as we saw, to deal with the situation. Quite frankly, keeping the war going in Gaza caused us just death of soldiers. We did not gain anything. We did not win anything. After the beginning of the war that opened in a very powerful move, in the past months, we're doing nothing in Gaza, just pulling in, pulling out. It was a waste of time. If we want to get to a final solution in Gaza, we need Trump's support. And at least declaring a transfer of the population in Gaza out of Gaza, declaring that he will stand to the side of Israel if Israel decides to go and fight in Gaza, but this time with no restraints of weapon embargo or restraints of humanitarian support, nothing, just let Israel go and finish the job. And with his declaration of supporting Israel to hit Iran with its nuclear program, I really have a lot of hopes in Trump.
Is Israel properly handling the Iranian threat?
I think so, yeah. I think by now Israel did whatever they can in order to harm the nuclear program of Iran as much as possible. Apparently, Israel does not have the ability to hit Iran. They worked miracles by make Iran defensible now and taking away their aerial defense system. That's great. But from here to go and take over the nuclear facilities, perhaps there is a gap that Israel will have to bridge with the support of the United States. Once Trump gives the green light to Israel, Israel will be able to go and destroy the nuclear facilities of Iran. And until then, they use any tactics they have. I mean, we see engineers getting killed incidentally, accidentally in Iran. We see the Mossad going into Iran and taking all the data and computers and folders that belong to the Iranian nuclear system. We see computers suddenly getting corrupt in Iran because Israel was able to get into them. So we utilize any step we can, but the final hit, the final step that Israel will take against it will be only with the support of the United States.
Where do you identify on Israel's political and religious spectrum? And do you have any friends on the other side?
I'm a national religions person. I raised my kids in a Jewish home. I'm very Zionistic. And yeah, I have a lot of friends on the other side. What's the other side? Like secular,
Well,
religious,
religiously,
secular?
and I assume you're more right wing, is
I'm
my
very
guess.
right wing,
Yeah,
yeah.
okay, that was my guess, but I don't want
Yeah.
to judge. Um, so, do you have more friends who are on the left, and do you have friends who are different than you religiously, either secular or ultra Orthodox Haredi?
Yeah. So I have friends from the left. I have employees from the left. And a lot of my employees are secular. A lot of my friends are secular. Obviously, I also have a lot of friends, religious, ultra Orthodox. Not so many, I would say, just because I'm not into, not sure the same social groups with them, but I get along with anyone. I don't get along with those who want to eliminate Judaism, eliminate religion. That I'm not in favor, but all the others have very good relationship with.
And for our last question, do you have more hope or fear for Israel and the Jewish people?
I have a lot of hope for the Jewish people and for the state of Israel. I think today we are in a much better place than we were on October 7th. I wish we did not have October 7th, absolutely. But have it happened, we, I believe, will get stronger and will be able to maintain our life in Israel in a more secured way. But this is only if we go through the path of doing anything we can in order to fight our enemies and win. Don't let them win anymore. Also, in terms of the nation of Israel, before October 7th, we were on the verge of a civil war because of a judicial reform. I'm not saying we are so unified today, but it's much better than we were before. And believe it or not, I really believe that October 7 happened because we needed to get a slap in our face for what we did to each other before October 7th. And perhaps we needed a slap in our face before it would be too late in terms of our relationship with our neighbors and enemies. And everything kind of fall together, having Trump in the White House, allowing us really to fight Hamas, allowing us really to hit Iran once and for all. And even before Trump, to be able to hit Hezbollah, which was a life-threatening military group against the state of Israel, that was a good success. So overall, I think we're moving on the right direction, praying for security, not necessarily peace, for the Jewish people in the state of Israel.
All right, Nitsana, thank you so much for answering our 18 questions. How was this for you?
Um, that was great. That was a very deep interview, and a lot of questions that I had really to think about them for the first time. And I'm happy that we delved into this question, and I hope our audience will like it too.